Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyersportsbetting.com. Look us up in the sports section on Roku, Dwyer Boxing and Sports News. The opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. I'm relentlessly pro-athlete. Relentlessly so. Because for the vast majority of professional athletes out there, especially those in collision sports like football and like boxing, it's a bad deal. We focus in the public on the guys making seven figures annually. We're not thinking about the actual career span of, let's say, an NFL football player. We're also not thinking about how alone that player is going to be if that player suffers major injury, right? Not just head trauma, not just concussions, perhaps Alzheimer's, perhaps dementia, but also problems with other joints, right? Knee replacements, hip problems, problems walking up a flight of stairs. Right now, Earl Campbell, one of the greatest running backs in NFL history, can barely walk. You hardly ever hear about it, right? When people remember Earl Campbell, it's as if his health problems don't exist. We turn back the clock to Earl Campbell wearing Houston Oiler blue, and no one senses the irony that the team is no longer in Houston, right? If Earl Campbell were to be celebrated by his former team, the celebration would have to take place in a different city under a team logo, under which Earl Campbell never played, right? It would be like the Baltimore Ravens celebrating Jim Brown. Well, in boxing, it's even worse than that, right? On TV right now, you have a program, League of Denial, and everyone is fixated on concussion risks in the NFL. Well, think about the injury risks in boxing. You have a huge fight, pay-per-view fight, happening this weekend between Juan Manuel Marquez and Timothy Bradley. Now, let's look closely at that fight, and I just want you to consider their trainers, right? Marquez is trained by Nacho Beristain. Bradley's trained by Joel Diaz. You want to know how big the injury risk is in boxing? Would it surprise you to learn that both Beristain and Joel Diaz had to quit being professional fighters because of eye injuries? Right? You're going to see these men in press conferences wearing glasses. But understand, both guys have vision problems that were caused in the ring. Think about how devastating that is. I consider these two men to be two of the elite trainers in the sport. Few guys know boxing better than these two, but even with that knowledge base, right, these guys could not continue their own careers because of injury. Well, let's look closely now at Timothy Bradley, because more stories are coming out about exactly how Timothy Bradley was following his victory over Ruslan Provodnikov. Now think about it. He won the fight. He then goes to the hospital. One doctor tells him he didn't suffer a concussion. The other doctor told him that he was concussed. Right? Bradley, in interviews, said, well, fortunately it wasn't a severe concussion because I didn't lose consciousness. So he goes home. By his own admission, he has not just speech problems, but balance problems. This goes on for weeks. Now, he has 4 kids. His problems were so pronounced, his wife was concerned. Right now, we don't talk about mental health in boxing. It's kind of like a hush-hush topic. Even though these guys are getting hit in the head for a living, and getting hit in the head can't help your mental outlook. Well, just know this. Timothy Bradley's 5'6". Understand that he fought Ruslan Provodnikov at 147. Would it surprise you to know that Timothy Bradley started feeling down after the Provodnikov fight and actually jumped in weight up to the 180s? Think about that. Folks, the weight limit for light heavy is 175. Timothy Bradley, a professional athlete, 5'6", jumped up into the 180s, right? Too heavy to fight, let's say, Bernard Hopkins, Sergei Kovalev, right? He would be a cruiserweight. When Bradley went back to the gym and started sparring, Joel Diaz didn't like what he saw. Bradley's timing was off. Bradley's coordination was off. Right? Think about it. Well, now Bradley is back. Joel Diaz is saying that it's as if he never left. No one's talking about the fact that Bradley has had to lose more than 30 pounds to make weight. Right? You know, even by Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. standards, that's astounding. And keep in mind, he's had to lose this weight while not being at his best. By his own admission, he's had to lose this weight after getting a diagnosis that he suffered a concussion in a fight. When's the last time you had slurred speech? For several days, if not weeks, right? And of course, did you think about then having a fight just a few months after that? Welcome to boxing. Let me also say too, in football, there's actually a union. The league has actually continued to exist for decades, right? Players can actually sue the league if they feel the league lied to them. Let's think about boxing. Let's think about Timothy Bradley for a moment. Let's think about injured fighters from years ago, like Nacho Beristain, Joel Diaz. Who would they sue? Understand, most promoters come and go, right? The promoters you're hearing about at the elite level, Golden Boy, Top Rank, those are the elite promoters. Those aren't the typical promoters that struggling fighters have to deal with on the way up, right? Top Rank, Golden Boy, their fighters are fighting in venues like the MGM Arena in Las Vegas, Madison Square Garden in New York. But you and I know there are a whole group of fights, in fact, most of the fights, happening in much smaller venues, the local arena, the town hall, places where the last word is auditorium or gymnasium, right? You have a lot of fights that, quite frankly, don't pull more than 1,000 fans. You have a lot of promoters who have just gotten in the game and who, even if they've been in the game for a long time, wouldn't have the kind of money needed to compensate a fighter who suffered, some life-altering permanent injury such as an eye injury and blindness. Right? Let me just point out too that some very well-known fighters have literally lost vision in an eye within the last 20 years. You remember Layman Brewster, who beat Vladimir Klitschko, right? Let's just talk about Vladimir Klitschko for a second. I'll just name one fighter, Vladimir Klitschko. Remember Layman Brewster, who beat Vladimir Klitschko? right? We'll play 6 degrees of separation. You know that Layman Brewster today is blind in one eye. Calvin Brock, who lost to Vladimir Klitschko. You know Calvin Brock today is apparently blind in one eye. That's just playing 6 degrees of separation with one fighter. Who would Brewster or Brock sue for their injuries, and under what theory? Right? Also, let's think through the sport too. Just like promoters come and go, managers come and go, right? Fighters really can't believe any representations they receive, right? Understand, the other guys in the sport are just risking their money and time. The fighter is literally risking their lives, right? What happens if a fighter develops dementia? What happens if a fighter develops slurred speech? What do? Let me also point out too that some great fighters, and I mean truly great fighters, have, developed health problems, showing you that no one's immune from developing health problems, right? Understand how desperate fighters are too. You have fighters literally risking it to be in fights. We're now finding out that Joe Frazier was blind in one eye for the majority of his career, right? We're finding out that Frazier was legally blind in one eye before the first Ali fight. Frazier goes through the 1970s blind in an eye, but yet he continued fighting. These fighters are warriors. They're taking big chances, right? Let me also point out too, these state athletic commissions here in the United States. Understand, many of the people on those commissions are political appointees, right? They're beneficiaries of political patronage. And even they are going to come and go. Even they have limited terms, right? So fighters really can only rely on one person, themselves, right? I feel that the fighter is risking so much more than the manager and then the promoter, that really, anytime I hear of a fighter holding out for more money or making certain demands in terms of, the conditions for the fight and things like that, or insisting that proper protocol is followed, right? Pre-fight drug testing, post-fight drug testing, I'm all in favor of that fighter because I understand what that fighter is risking. Right, again, just look at the elite trainers. Both of the trainers for this Marquez Bradley fight, both of them, suffered major eye injuries. Look at other elite trainers. Look at Freddie Roach. He suffers from Parkinson's. Right? Understand, these are the lucky guys in the sport. Right? These are the successful trainers. Rest assured, they're fighters right now dealing with similar health risks who haven't been as lucky as Nacho Berestein, Joel Diaz, and Freddie Roach, right? And then look at Timothy Bradley. He's a young man in his prime right now. No doubt he wants to fight. He views himself as still making his legacy. But do any of us really know what's going to happen to Timothy Bradley 20, 25 years from now? Especially after he himself has admitted that for several weeks following his fight against Ruslan Provodnikov, he had speech problems. How's this different than the head trauma several of these NFL players have had? Right? Food for thought. Thanks for stopping by.